Recording in progress.
Thank you. All right, good evening and welcome to the March 27th meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. This meeting is being held virtually via Zoom video conference and is also being broadcast by FCTV on cable channel 9. As this meeting is being recorded by Zoom and broadcast by FCTV, please be cognizant of what you say, how you say it, and what can be seen and heard in your background. We're missing one commissioner tonight. However, we have a quorum. We're moving forward. Just a reminder to the commissioners for commenting. I'll call on each of you in turn, so let's not speak over each other. And the votes have to be done by roll call. So when I call your name, please state your name and your vote for the record, even if you've made the motion or the second. To our public participants, at any time during this meeting, you may enter any comments or questions via the chat function. At the appropriate time, they will be read into the record. If you'd like to be heard on a specific hearing, let us know via the chat function. Then at the appropriate time, I will call for public comment. When you are selected, you will be moved into the hearing as a participant. As such, you must have your video enabled, be succinct, and respectful of others. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes each. Regarding RDAs, under a request for determination of applicability, the applicant is asking the commission to determine if the provisions of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and/or the Falmouth Wetlands bylaw apply to their proposed project. A negative determination is that the provisions of the act and/or the bylaw do not apply. Therefore, the project may proceed as proposed. However, a positive determination means that the provisions of the act and/or the bylaw do in fact apply and/or may require some conditions. Therefore, the project would require a notice of intent application. So as an applicant, you kind of want to hear a negative answer. For the benefit of anyone waiting for a particular hearing tonight, but so you're not waiting unnecessarily, a following hearing is expected to be continued. Number 9, Compass Circle. Before we start on the official agenda, I'd like to welcome our newest agent to the team, Fallon Queenie. Thank you for being here tonight. Welcome to the team.
Thank you.
Also, we have a new commission member tonight, Ron Driscoll. Thank you for volunteering your time and being with us.
You're welcome.
All right, first up, vote minutes, March 14, 2024.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to approve the minutes, pending any comments this evening.
Bird, second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to accept the minutes of March 14. Any questions or comments? All right, we're going to vote to accept the minutes. Ron, I'm going to skip over you. You weren't there. Betsy.
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney.
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Maury.
Harlow Hawks, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous with the appropriate quorum. We have accepted the minutes of March 14. Thank you, Kristen. Next up, request for a continuance under a notice of intent. Philip Chase, 9 Compass Circle, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to reconstruct an existing dock and install a concrete block retaining wall. And Ron, for this purpose, we're simply voting to continue this hearing.
Yes, the applicant has requested a continuance until April 17th.
Bird, so moved.
Gladfelter, second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to continue this till April 17th. Questions or comments? All right, we're voting on the continuance. Betsy.
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney.
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Maury.
Harlow Hawks, aye.
Ron.
Aye. Ron Driscoll, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have continued this until 4/17. Next up are requests for determination of applicability. First up, John and Tina Osborne, 27 Clipper Lane, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to upgrade the existing sewage disposal system to Title V standards. Fallon,
Staff recommends a -2 under the state and bylaw. This area is solely located in a flood zone and resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
Bird, so moved.
Patton, second.
all right, we have a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation. Questions or comments? All right, we're voting to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney,
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye, Maury,
Carlo Hawks, aye.
Ron,
Driscoll, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation.
Hey,
Next up.
Jamie,
Yes,
Jamie, I
ma'am.
think somebody has something on in the background,
Huh?
like a TV set.
Okay, I'll watch out for the secret square. All right,
I'm still in shock.
Hey, Ron, it's on your end.
Yeah, I'll go quiet it down.
Well, yeah, I have to run.
We're stalling.
Okay, all set.
Thank you. Next up, Brian and Fiona Kennedy, 9 Cotuit Road, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to remove existing cesspool and install a new Title V sewage disposal system. Fallon,
Staff recommends a -3 under the state and -2 under the bylaw. Resource areas are not confirmed.
Bird, so moved.
Patton, second.
thank you. We have a motion and a reluctant second to accept staff's recommendation. Questions or comments? All right, we're voting to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney,
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye, Maury,
Carlo Hawks, aye.
Ron,
Driscoll, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Next up, Kenneth and Kathleen Walton, 8 Riverway Avenue, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to pump, dry, fill and abandon the existing cesspool and install a new Title V sewage disposal system. Alan,
Staff recommends a -3 under the state and -2 under the bylaw. Resource areas are not confirmed.
Bird, so moved.
Patton, second.
all right, we have a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation. Questions or comments? All right, we're voting to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney,
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye, Maury,
Carlo Hawks, aye.
Ron,
Driscoll, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Next up, Longfellow Design Build Inc., 220 Scranton Avenue, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to remove an existing tent and wood deck and install a pergola and bluestone patio. Fallon,
Staff recommends a -3 under the state and -2 under the bylaw. Resource areas are not confirmed.
Bird, so moved.
Patton, second.
ooh. All right, we have a motion and competition on the second to accept staff's recommendation. Questions or comments?
No.
We're voting to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney,
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye, Maury,
Carlo Hawks, aye.
Ron,
Driscoll, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Next up, Gansett Trust trustees, care of Peter Jeffrey, President, Gansett Road, map ID 49-03-016-000B, Woods Hole, Mass, for permission to install an osprey pole and platform to provide alternative nesting off of a nearby utility pole. Fallon,
Staff recommends a -2 under the state and bylaw. Resource areas are not confirmed.
Bird, so moved.
Patton, second.
all right, we have a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation. Questions or comments? All right, we're voting to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney,
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Maury,
Carlo Hawks Eye.
Ron,
Driscoll, I.
Patton,
Steve.
aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Next up are requests for a hearing under a notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. As a reminder, public commenting is limited to 3 minutes. So I encourage you to stay within the purview of this board, which are the rules and regulations of the Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw, and how they pertain to a particular application. The chair reserves the right to stop any commenting that is disparaging or inconsequential to the hearing. Also, please know that all correspondence received by the Conservation Department is forwarded to all commissioners and becomes part of the record. We will not read each and every letter we receive at a hearing. Remember, our jurisdiction is that of the Wetlands Protection Act and the Wetlands Bylaw only. First up, RT Bowman Builders, 121 Little Neck Bars Road, West Falmouth, Mass, for after the fact permission to install a patio and for permission to install an outdoor shower enclosure, conduct minor property improvements, and install mitigation plantings. Alyssa.
Thank you. Mike Borselli is here to present his project.
Excellent. Mr. Borselli, you're up, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, Mike Borselli, Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant and property owner. With your permission, I'd like to share my screen.
Yes, sir.
This property is at 121 Little Neck Bars Road. It has water frontage on the upper reaches of West Falmouth Harbor in an area identified as Harbor Head. There is resource areas include land under the ocean, land containing shellfish. There's a salt marsh. And then there's also land subject to coastal storm flowage. In this case, there's a boundary on blue boundary that represents the boundary between DE 19 and DE 18. And then there's also the Falmouth Wetlands Regulation 25-foot boundary velocity zone. The project proposes a few minor property improvement activities that, collectively resulted in enough work to rise to the level of filing a notice of intent. I have met with staff to review this prior. There was a possibility, I thought it might be an RDA, but we discovered it made more sense to file a notice of intent. So we're here before you under a notice of intent. And I've also received a staff report with some items from the past. A previous owner, this is a relatively new owner who wants to make these improvements and do the right thing and mitigate however it's deemed appropriate. So these items that were raised in the staff report are going to require me to do a site visit with your staff, which will mean I need to request a continuance. So I will be asking for a continuance so we can address some of the items in the staff report. But I also wanted to get your feedback before I do that in case there's other things. So I can come back hopefully on the 17th and everything will be addressed and you could close the hearing. So the project activities I will walk you through include starting at the street. The new owner wanted to create a privacy screen along the front property line, and they wanted to do that with a row of eastern red cedar that I've shown here in green. Staff commented that the spacing seemed tight and that the area is infested with ivy, English ivy, and they might be competing with the English ivy. And so they commented that we might want to look into whether or not the ivy would be eradicated. I hadn't thought in that detail, so we need to take a closer look at that. I mean, we can space out the cedar trees so that they can grow in. And we can take a look at the ivy, and if the ivy needs to be eradicated, we can come back with a plan to do that as well. Moving from the street into the site. By the way, that activity is outside jurisdiction except for the fact that it's in an AE flood zone. It's more than 100 feet from salt marsh. Moving towards the house, the property owner would like to add a little bit more crushed stone and put in a trash enclosure, which I'm showing in this area next to the existing shed. There's no required mitigation for those activities because they're outside of all A and B zones. There's a small stone wall along the edge of the property line that the applicant would like to remove and then plant additional cedar trees where the wall is. We can look at that with staff too with regard to the spacing and if there's any ivy over here. I suspect there is some ivy. There's a cedar tree here that's very close to the house and in decline, and we're proposing to remove that cedar. There are also 2 existing cedars right on the property boundary that we're requesting permission to prune. As mitigation for removing the declining cedar in this position, we're proposing a new eastern red cedar to be installed here. Moving to this side of the house, the new owner would like to create a rinse station enclosure here with dry well. There is an existing patio that they would like to connect from that patio to the rinse station with additional hardscape. Evidently, this patio, which has an area of 240 square feet, was installed without permission. It could have been approved if they had applied for permission, but it would have required, of course, the mitigation planting. It doesn't move closer to the wetland resource than the closest point of the present primary structure. So if they had applied for permission, they offered the required 3-to-1 mitigation, it could have been approved. So we're asking, this was a previous owner, we're asking for permission for it to remain, and we're proposing to provide mitigation for that patio. Regarding the mitigation, the areas of all of the increases in impervious surfaces or pervious surfaces that won't support natural vegetation are itemized here. There's the 5x8 rinse station enclosure. There's the added 50 square feet of patio, and then there's of course the existing unpermitted patio. When you apply a factor of 3 to that, it's just under 1,000 square feet of mitigation required. So we've proposed to do, and it's shaded in green, 1,000 square feet of mitigation in an area that's lawn that would supplement the existing buffer to the salt marsh. The staff had some other questions. There was a question about the boundary of the salt marsh. The boundary of the salt marsh was determined by our office by observation, and also in accordance with the DEP regs, you look at high spring tide, and high spring tide tracks right at the 3-foot elevation. So between what we observed on the ground and the fact that that's elevation 3, we were confident that that was the boundary of the salt marsh. But again, we're happy to meet with staff on site and look at that a little closer and adjust it if it makes sense, and that would just simply adjust the 100-foot boundary from the salt marsh a little bit further landward I don't know that it would really have any impact on mitigation planting, but we're happy to take a look at that. Couple other comments in the staff report are about some historic buffer planting requirements that we were unaware of back in '03. I guess there was a requirement to do some additional buffer planting. We're not opposed to doing any of this or making it right, but I wanted to go through it in more detail with your staff on site and do what needs to be done to come into compliance with all the old things and hopefully come back to you with a project that you can feel comfortable issuing an order of conditions for. I think that sums it up. And I'm happy to get your feedback and then request a continuance.
Thanks, Mike. Alyssa,
Thank you. I think Mike has addressed our comments to the extent we can at this time, prior to having a site visit, so I have nothing else to add. Thank you.
all right. Fallon,
No additional comments. Thanks.
okay. All right. Commissioner comments, Betsy,
No questions or comments. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jamie.
all right. Courtney,
No questions or comments.
all right. Well put, Mike. Very thorough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maury,
No questions, thank you.
okay. Ron,
No questions. Thank you.
all right. Steve,
No questions. Thanks.
wow. All right. Alyssa, do you see anything in the public chat function, please?
There are no hands raised. There are 2 comments in the chat. The first does not have to do with this project, just someone who wants to speak during a later project. And there is a second chat. It doesn't have an address associated with it in terms of what's on our agenda tonight. I believe it has to do with the next notice, but just since it doesn't say it, I'm going to read it. Project and the house abandoned for years and many conservation issues. I believe that has to do with 43 Miami.
All right. All right. Anything else anybody wants to add? All
No.
right, Mr. Bocelli, you have a request?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd request a continuance to April 17th.
So moved, Harlow Hawks.
Bird
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to continue this hearing until April 17th. Last call. All right, we're voting on the continuance. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney,
Bird eye.
Matthews, aye. Maury,
Harlow Hawks, aye.
Ron,
Driscoll, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have continued this until April 17th. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you all. Have a good night.
Right, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, the next one has been previously continued. This brings us to continued request for hearing under a notice of intent. Stefanos Bubalis, 43 Miami Avenue, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to construct a second-story addition, reconstruct a deck and entryway, and install mitigation plantings. Alyssa.
Yes, I've promoted Mark Dibb to present his revised plan.
All right, Mark, before you start, the quorum excludes Steve tonight. All right, Mr. Dibb, you're up, sir.
Good evening, Mark Dibb with Cape and Islands Engineering, representing the applicant for 43 Miami Ave. With your permission, I'd like to share my screen.
Yes, sir.
So this was a project we had previously opened. The main proposed piece of the project is to add a second story addition over the existing structure. And then you'll see this 10 by 5 covered entry is a little bit larger than the existing stoop. And basically that triggered about 32 square feet of additional area, which required, which I can get into a little bit, instead of 2-to-1, 3-to-1 mitigation, resulting in 96 square feet of mitigation. So the plan changes that were made, first thing, probably the biggest change, our wetland scientist visited the site and did determine that there was a small or a thin piece of salt marsh at the bottom of the bank or the face of the wall. So we've added that to the plan and revised the buffer zones. So there's basically 100-foot A buffer zone again, which instead of 2-to-1 mitigation for this small increase required 3-to-1 mitigation. We also verified the location of an existing fence, which happens to literally the 4-inch posts are straddling the property line. So, and our applicant or our client purchased this house after the fence, or yes, after the fence. So the fence was existing. So, per our knowledge and our client's knowledge, we're not 100% sure of ownership of that fence. So, but we are proposing to remove approximately 17 feet of that fence, which is in the velocity zone. And technically, we believe a butter consent might be needed for that. So, which we do not have at this point, but I mean, I'd be comfortable that it could all be ironed out under a condition, you know, that prior to construction, either a letter be provided, you know, or some effect to get that portion of a post and rail fence removed just prior to the main start of construction. There was a little revision to a lawn limit that's been updated. The dry wells, we've connected this dry well to the existing downspout that's just flowing out onto the ground, so there shouldn't be that issue with the dry well. And lastly, there was some questions about the planting plan. I'd be happy to remove the, we basically had 50% of the plan being either or Carolina rose, creeping juniper, and sweet fern. We'd be more than happy to replace that with a more suitable combination, potentially maybe 50%. Change the bayberry to 50% and then maybe do 25 of some sweet pepper bush or inkberry. But we could work with staff just on a revised planting scenario for the mitigation. And I mean, that staff has within their comments noted it would be about 12 plants to fill the required mitigation. As well, we can make a specific note on what that area that is noted as bare area. There is a small bare area on the top of the bank, approximately 3x5 area. We can make a specific planting note regarding that as well. And the last thing, there was concerns about this drainage from the roadway. I do know Jen reached out to DPW, but I'm not sure if of any status of that. Again, it's a we believe it's a roadway drainage problem, and it should not particularly be associated with you know, this house renovation project. We'd be we're more than happy to continue to try to see if we can get any feedback from the town. But again, I feel it's a different project than this one. With that, I'm gonna stop sharing and like to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mark. Alyssa.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark, for addressing all of our comments there. I did have one thing to add. I did speak today with the engineering company representing the abutter to the north. They surveyed the fence differently. They think it's fully on the property to the north, but I think either way, if the commission can just vocalize their opinion about the part of the fence in the velocity zone, and if it will be required to be removed, we can work out the details with who is to remove it later on. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Fallon,
No additional comments. Thanks.
all right. And for the record, I stated that Steve is not on the quorum, but Ron, because you haven't been included prior, you're not on this quorum either. Just to say it. So that brings us to commissioner comments. Courtney,
The dry wells that you are gonna connect into, are those existing already?
No, they are not.
Okay. No other questions. Thank you.
all right. All right, Maury,
I had no comments. Thank you for addressing it and thank you for the staff report.
all right, Betsy,
My only comment is back to Alyssa that I agree that 17 feet of fence in the velocity zone should be removed, whoever's responsibility it is. That's all. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Mark.
all right. All right. Alyssa, is there anything in the public chat function, please?
There is one comment for the gentleman who has his hand raised, so I will promote him as a panelist.
Thank you.
When you can, Mr. Moody, in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see buttons to turn on your
Unmute.
video and on. There you
All
go.
right. Now, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, turn your
Okay,
video
so-
on, please.
Excuse me?
Your video, please.
Yep, certainly. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is that good?
You're up, sir. Yes.
Okay, so after the last hearing, we had heard the commission talk about a field structural foundation. And that's been a concern of us neighbors since the beginning. And I know that doesn't directly relate to the Conservation Commission, but what our concerns are is that the house was sold as is, with a failed structural foundation and a structural frame problem. And we're concerned that they're going to start the project, start to raise the house, and then the faults of the foundation are going to be all of a sudden stop the project. We're going to be stuck with a house that's sitting there, not finished. And then to bring on further conservation issues, I've had 50 years of building experience. The only way to fix that failed foundation is to excavate out the entire lot and all the bad soil underneath the failed foundation, and to which will bring on immense delays in the project, immense conservation problems, and it just will go on, and just we're very concerned over that. And secondly, I know also that there's other problems why the house was sold as a tear down. It's loaded with mold inside. Those are things that have to be mitigated on the building permit. I know it's not related to conservation, but I also feel that it's a good time to address it now. And the other concern with all the neighbors, we've all talked this over at this point, is that we've had, we've put up sheds in our neighborhood. We've gone through the full, approval process with conservation and so forth. And I know that conservation has even held up, or ZBA has held up some shed constructions to within 1.5 inches. And And now it seems that they can just keep their shed there that was never permitted, along with a deck that was never permitted. And there's no talk of that and no talk of corrections on that. And we're very concerned why that, even that shed is allowed to stay, not included in the you know, the ground coverage and those type of calculations. And those are our comments, and you know, we'd like to see the homeowner build a nice house there and have success. We're not trying to fight them, but we do see issues that could affect the neighborhood. Thank you very much for hearing me out.
Thank you, sir. Alyssa, do you want to address that, or you want me to?
Thank you. Mark, can you clarify? I believe we did get a letter from an architect that confirmed the structure and the foundation is solid to support a second story. There's no raising with the Z or IAS either way. It's just an addition of a second story on the top of what exists.
Correct. Yeah, that's one thing I forgot to mention is that we did submit that letter.
Could we get a copy of that?
Sure, sir.
Thank you.
So I suppose if there are any issues, Mark, it's not to become an emergency. There's to be an amended order filed and, you know, the house stabilized, of course, and then we could proceed from there.
Yep, correct. Once, you know, if we get to a building permit stage and there's our issues, yeah, we would understand we'd have to come back
Okay.
for, you know, if excavation is needed for foundations or anything like that.
Excellent.
Thank you.
To Mr. Muty's second comments, the interior of the structure, as you said, isn't really within the purview of this board. But to address the final comments, I know that we've had a conversation, Mr. Muty, when I was on your property about this one, and that there were some concerns. As I do with all of the notices, I do a full property review, looking through all the permits that we can have, through all the aerial photos that I can identify. You know, as far as I can tell, there has been a shed on this property since the 90s. The GIS aerial photo doesn't specify a year, but going back that far, we may not even have a permit on file from it back then. I'm not even sure if one was required back then. In terms of the deck, I did not find evidence that it hadn't been permitted. It's there in the 2005 aerials. It's there in the 2001 aerial. And from what I can tell, in the 90s. So the only thing I really could find was that some foundation plantings had been removed. We did get a complaint during the fall of last year for some unpermitted tree removal. There was evidence of pruning by the overhead wires. I can tell there was one tree removed on the property, but I actually think that was a couple years ago. So from what I could deduce from our records aerials, I don't believe there has been any extensive unpermitted activity on the property other than some vegetation work this fall.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Any other public comments?
Nope, thank you.
All right. Anything else from the board? Mark? All right.
I
What do you
see.
think about-
Courtney has a question.
Jamie, I got, the architect who wrote this letter, is the architect an AIA registered architect and have or do we need a structural engineer on this? I share the comment. I would be concerned that if that foundation isn't adequate to support the second floor, that's going to change the scope of work.
For sure.
And I would rather have all of that resolved before the first shovel gets into the ground.
Okay, that's the point of obtaining the letter from the architect. If it's a registered architect, that's adequate. We don't need a structural engineer.
Mm-mm.
All right.
Amy,
Anything else?
we do have a second hand raised.
Yeah, I don't believe that the
Excuse
building
me,
code.
please don't interrupt my meeting.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, should we finish with Mr. Mudi's comments and then proceed to the next person with their hand raised?
Mr. Muti, one more time.
Yeah, an architect is not allowed to do a structural analysis on a foundation. You would need a professional registered engineer for that.
I agree.
The board
Take
has
that up with the
regularly,
building commissioner.
the board has regularly accepted structural engineers or architectural letters regarding foundations.
Mhm.
All right. There's something else, Alyssa?
There is another individual with their hand raised, so I will promote them. And there are no additional chats at this time.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be a pain on this, but
Well, you made your point. I get it.
I think we ought to insist on a structural engineer examining that foundation.
The building department accepts letters from from a registered architect. So that's out of our,
Sorry to interrupt, but not on a structural issue.
yeah, okay.
Mhm.
All right, anything else?
Mr.
Maury?
Goulart, I'm trying to promote you as a panelist. If you can click. Oh, I think you have.
Maury?
I just had a concern about the shed. Is there any way it could be moved out of the V zone? There's enough room on the sides of the building. I mean, we're taking the fence out of the V zone. I think the shed's a major problem in a V zone. I know it's supposedly been there for 30 years, but that was just my add on. Thank you. That's all.
All right. Mr. Ballard, you're up, sir. Please turn your video on.
Hey, is it on?
Not yet.
In the video, Lindy. That video. Okay, we on now?
The screen's a little blurry. Do you have a piece of tape over it?
Sorry.
No problem.
Okay, there you are.
Okay, is
Yeah,
that better?
good.
All right.
Yes.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. So in lieu of the last meeting, we discussed that on the fence issue. That fence, we just talked to Tom today, and that fence is 6 inches off the line towards us. So there's no, I'm confused on why you're saying you're going to take down my fence. I thought we were going to have a meeting last week with, no? We had a meeting with our engineer.
Sir, if
Yeah.
the fence is on your property, then this project would not be applicable for your property. They would not, be able to go onto yours to remove the fence. It seems that there's a bit of a discrepancy in the two surveys. Either way, the issue is that there is a structure in a velocity zone that was installed without a permit, and it should never, it would never
the
have
fence-
been permitted.
Okay, the
Yeah.
fence was under a permit because it was under a mitigation that we put a fence up when we had to do a Title V back in 2012.
Okay, so that
It's
was
on
the
the
Board of
original
Health permit.
plans.
Okay, is the fence on your property? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And I'm not aware of you having to have a permit for a fence that's under 6 feet. It was on the original survey. We had to put in two tree plantings, and we had to put a fence up. Now, they wanted us to put the fence all the way down to the street, but we did not do that. We just went as far as where it is right now, to the Tupelo tree.
Okay, we can look into that further for you.
Okay.
All right, anything else? All right, folks, what are you thinking?
I'll make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement. Is that what you're thinking, Jamie?
Yes, thank you.
Carlo Hawk, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the hearing. Anything else? All right, we're voting to close the hearing. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney,
Bird, no.
You're gonna vote not to close the hearing?
I want this engineering thing resolved.
Okay. Matthews, aye. Maury,
Carlo Hawk's eye. We can put that in the findings.
yeah.
Courtney.
3-1, we have closed the hearing. Thank you.
All set. You close it.
All right. Next up, Ciari Huberu, trustee, Huberu Trust, 110 Ransom Road, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to raise RAZE, an existing single-family dwelling and construct a new single-family dwelling, install a new Title V sewage disposal system, and install mitigation plantings. Alyssa,
Yes, thank you. We had a last minute request to continue this hearing until April 3rd.
So moved.
Carlo
Second.
Hawk, second.
all right. We have a motion and a second to continue this hearing until April 3rd. The quorum is all of us tonight, since it has not been open, which doesn't matter. We're voting simply to continue it. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney,
Bird eye.
Matthews, aye. Maury,
Carlo Hawk's eye.
Ron,
Driscoll, aye.
Steve.
Aye.
It is unanimous. We have continued this until April 3rd. All right, next up is a request to extend an existing order of conditions. First up, Matt and Susan Dempsey, 172 Antler Short Drive, Falmouth, Mass. DEP number 25-4624, requesting a 6-month extension. Alyssa. Alyssa?
Sorry. Staff recommends a 6-month extension.
So moved.
So
Carlo
moved.
Hawk.
Gladfelter.
Bird second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to grant a 6-month extension. Questions or comments? All right, this is to grant a 6-month extension. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney,
Bird eye.
Matthews, aye. Maury,
Carlo Hawk's eye.
Ron,
Driscoll, aye.
Steve.
Madden, aye.
It is unanimous. We have granted a 6-month extension. All right, next up is other business. Jeffrey Oppenheim, 123 Adamancet Road, Falmouth, Mass, to discuss mitigation requirements. And Alyssa, for clarification, you're not asking us to the certificate of compliance, correct? We're just trying to
Correct.
iron out mitigation.
Yes, the homeowner has mitigation to install either way, and instead of doing it twice, he would like clarification on if this will require it from the board. So this has to do
Okay.
with the 2 walkways on the other side of the home. Attorney Oppenheim is here to follow up with this matter, and it was the staff's opinion that the pathways were not delineated on any previous plans or photos that we happen to have in our records of the property. However, Attorney Oppenheim noted that there was existing gravel on site. It might have been a little sporadic at times, sort of maybe it was placed and got washed down the slope a little bit, but it was there. So he is making the argument that it did exist on the property.
Okay, just as a reminder, this is one that we continued previously, so we would all have the opportunity to go out and take a look at.
Correct.
Ron, I'm going to exclude you from the quorum on this.
Understood.
Okay. All right. Mr. Oppenheim, do you have anything you'd like to say to start?
Well, I would like to thank the commissioners for going out to my property and taking a view of the property. I just missed Courtney Bird as I was driving in, and I staked the area in question several minutes after he left. So I don't know when the other commissioners were out there. I don't know if there was any difficulty in seeing what I was trying to explain during our last meeting, which was essentially that there was pea stone sized gravel on both sides of this cabin prior to our purchase. I added a larger grade or denser grade gravel over the pea stone. There were areas of the pea stone where, the grass and weeds had grown through. The cabin had been abandoned for about 9 or 10 years, and there was little or no work done on the exterior. But the stone was there. And I did add to it. And in an attempt to try to, frankly, stabilize the land next to the cabin so that the stone wouldn't continue to migrate, down the bank. So I would respectfully request that the commission agree with me and allow, it's really what comes down to, I think, 200 some odd square feet difference between, in plantings based on the difference between the opinion of the staff and my position. I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. All right. I'm just going to poll everybody. You can comment or not. Assuming everybody had the opportunity to go out there. I saw it. It looks to me just as much as it's a drip line as much as a pathway. So, me personally, I don't have a problem with it. Maury.
I just felt that it was more substantial than maybe what the drip edge was. And it's actually the one closest to the pond is the most fragile as far as erosion goes. And I think putting the board in, the womanized retaining board will prevent a lot of overspill, which I think was happening with the old gravel walkway or drip edge or whatever. But it would be nice to see some kind of planting on that sharp drop to the coastal bank, but that's just my opinion.
It's planned, Mr. Chairman. We plan on planting that area on the other side of the board where the soils are disturbed. That's going to be in the plan that we present to the staff for mitigation planting.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be the most important spot right there. It's a beautiful spot, very natural.
All right, Steve.
I think Maury covered. Thank you.
Betsy.
I don't think any additional mitigation planning for these walkways is required. It looked just like the pictures that Jeff showed. And I worked my way around and I'm like, what's the square marked out? And I'm like, oh, I know what he wants us to look at here. But yeah.
Yeah, my
the photographs were good. Yeah.
Well, I didn't think they were so great, but thank you.
Well, they weren't great, but they got the idea across.
Okay.
All right, Courtney.
Yeah, even though I beat Jeff to the punch in terms of staking, it was quite clear what his description was, and I mean, I'm fine with what Jeff was proposing. I think, I think that's it. That's my comment. I agree with Betsy, and it's not a big deal.
All right, Alyssa, what would you like to see us vote? Verbiage would you like to use?
Just my lack of experience here. We can vote something in other business, right? Doesn't have to be a hearing to have a vote. You can vote something and.
Oh yeah, we can just vote so that there's a consensus.
Okay. I would
just
perhaps.
for clarity.
Yeah, maybe we can just vote to not require mitigation for the existing walkways.
So moved, Gladfelter.
Bird second.
All right, is everybody clear on that?
Yes,
Well, this is a positive thing.
yes.
Betsy,
Mr. Chairman, before a vote is taken, just for clarification, the most recent plan submitted to the commission shows a mitigation required of 1,647 square feet. So if the vote could include that, just for clarification for the staff and for my landscaper.
well, what we're voting on is that there's no additional mitigation required for the gravel.
Okay, I mean, it's essentially the same.
Alyssa, have you accepted the, well, I guess accepted the plan submitted for the mitigation so far?
I know we have it, but I don't think we've
I know you don't have it.
Okay.
Because I was waiting to see what the commission felt this evening, and then I could go from there.
Then what we're gonna vote the way it's been stated, that there's no additional for this, for that piece. And I think that clarifies that. And then whatever you guys work out as required mitigation for the other project, that's that. Maury.
And I just would probably add in that there's no future putting pavers in that drip edge, you know, that he puts blue stone, and then the next thing we're gonna have a patio, not you, but the next person will be a patio or whatever. So no impervious, it's just gonna be the crushed stone.
Mr. Chairman, there is some pavers on both sides of the cabin. Just want to clarify, is the commission want those pavers removed?
No.
Or is it okay for them to be on top of the stone?
Well, then we get into the impervious surface, and then we go back to the mitigation for impervious surface, moving closer to the resource.
Was the bluestone patio part of this the mitigation requirement?
There's no bluestone patio. They're just, if you were out there, there were a few pavers that were in those walkways.
Yeah, I don't have a heart attack.
I don't have a problem with that.
What Maury is saying is that there can't be any additional. So we're accepting that the gravel that exists. We're just trying to make a point that you can't add pavers on top of that.
But there's more than gravel. There's already pavers out there.
Yeah.
But in the old photographs, there were no pavers. If maybe I'm mistaken.
Yes.
But
No, you're correct. You are correct.
all right, so I have no problem with the gravel drip edge, you know, to be a walkway drip edge, but I mean, it's impervious surface and pavers. I mean, we knock everybody else up about it, that if they put step stones, they're counted. And I think that's what staff was headed toward, is that they're adding impervious. I mean, just take the bluestone steps out of the gravel and call it a day.
Okay, will do.
So let's amend the motion to include that.
Should have let us vote. All right. Anything else? All right. We're voting on the amended motion. Everybody clear?
Yes.
Betsy.
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney.
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Maury.
Arlo Hawks, aye.
Steve.
And I.
It is unanimous. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Oppenheim.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your service.
Night, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Night, Jeff.
All right. Next up, vote orders of conditions. Matthew and Kara Rinaldi, 386 Edgewater Drive East, East Falmouth, Mass. And the quorum, well, Ron, sorry, once again, you're excluded.
He'll be on
Don't
soon
take-
enough.
Okay, I can wait my turn.
Alyssa,
All right. So this project, first and foremost, was to reconstruct the home on pilings, as part of it is located in a velocity zone, so they will have a small enclosed space. Updating the Title V. There were some unpermitted features on the property, such as a fire pit and patio, and those are to be removed. This notice of intent was also to respond to a violation on the property from a previous homeowner in which the majority of the buffer between the home and the water was removed about 7-ish years ago. So they are proposing a plan from Blue Flax Design to replant some trees sort of to the sides of the property and revegetate the buffer with a variety of shrubs. They reduced from their last plan. Instead of 2 paths, there's just 1 path to the water. And they moved a couple trees away from crowding trees and property lines. They replaced some of the mitigation plantings with ones more often approved by the board. The dog fence has been removed because it was proposed in a velocity zone. And I think that hits the main points.
Was that the one that just had a fence on either side, but no fence towards the water?
I think so.
Yeah, for the dog.
Yeah, I know we did have a comment from Steve requesting that we condition that on the north side of the home, there be no utilities installed, no cantilevers, just to keep that offset from the property line to the home. And then there was just one more tree they had to move over a little bit, but those are the only 2 notes that I had.
anybody have anything different?
The only
Additional?
other thing, Jamie, you had the shower or ACs will be in the footprint of the house,
Yes.
and that's all.
I'll make a
All right.
motion.
Well, hold on, Steve.
I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with my comments, and I'd like to make sure they're included.
They are.
Yeah, they're fine.
Thank you.
All right.
I'll make a
Go ahead,
motion to issue an order of conditions as discussed.
Bird second.
All right. We have, excuse me, a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions as discussed. Anything else? All right, we're voting to issue the order. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney,
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Maury,
Carlo Hawk's eye.
Steve.
Pat and I.
It is unanimous. With this quorum, we have issued an order of conditions. Well, Ron and Fallon, you guys get off easy. It was a short night.
Yeah.
Don't worry, we'll
Only 8
torture you another
o'clock.
night.
We'll make up for it another night, don't worry.
Yeah.
Not
Don't get
next
too
week,
comfortable.
though.
I make a motion to adjourn. Carlo Hawk's.
Bird second. We should
Gladfelter, aye.
explain to Ron the protocol here. We don't.
He'll
get to
figure
the-
it
He would have
out.
followed if you
Gladfelter,
didn't
aye.
interrupt.
Ron. He knows.
Bird,
Come on.
bird, aye.
Carlo Hawk's eye.
Ron,
Driscoll, aye.
Pat and I was going to ask that we go in alphabetical order by last name, but then I realized I'm still last.
sorry, buddy.